John Wayne pointed a gun at the camera in over 170 films, and every single time, something happened. The audience leaned forward. They believed. They forgot they were watching an actor from Iowa named Marion Morrison. Those guns transformed him into sheriffs, soldiers, and outlaws who defined what an American hero looked like on screen. If you want to understand how Hollywood built its greatest icon, you need to understand the weapons in his hands. Subscribe now, because we are about to break down 7 firearms that turned John Wayne into a legend. Wayne started acting in the late 1920s when westerns were cheap entertainment cranked out by studios looking for quick profits. The guns back then were whatever the prop department had lying around. Nickel-plated revolvers that sparkled under lights, rifles that looked good but had nothing to do with historical accuracy. Nobody cared. These were Saturday matinee pictures for kids who just wanted to see the good guy win. Studios produced dozens of these films every year, cycling through actors and horses and costumes without much thought about what made one Western different from another. But Wayne cared. As his career grew through the 1930s and into the golden age of Hollywood, he started paying attention to what he carried on screen. He worked with armorers from Stembridge Gun Rentals, the company that supplied weapons to nearly every major studio. He rejected flashy props that looked fake. He wanted guns that felt real in his hands, weapons that matched the time periods of his films, even when directors did not notice the difference. Wayne practiced handling these firearms until the movements became second nature. He learned to reload without looking, to draw smoothly from a holster, to aim down iron sights the way actual gunfighters would have aimed. This attention to detail separated Wayne from dozens of other cowboy actors who treated guns as interchangeable accessories. The guns became extensions of his characters, visual shortcuts that told audiences exactly what kind of man they were watching before he spoke a single word of dialogue. Here are the 7 firearms that defined his career. Number 7. The Colt Walker Revolver. This massive handgun weighed 4.5 pounds and fired .44 caliber black powder rounds. Samuel Colt designed it in 1847 specifically for the Texas Rangers who needed stopping power against mounted Comanche warriors. The gun was so powerful that early models sometimes exploded from the pressure of their own charges. Wayne carried the Colt Walker in True Grit, the 1969 film that finally won him an Academy Award after decades of nominations and near misses. His character, Rooster Cogburn, was a one-eyed marshal with a drinking problem and a talent for violence that made other men nervous. The Walker fit him perfectly. Its size matched Wayne's 6'4" frame. Its reputation for raw power matched a character who solved problems with bullets rather than words. When Cogburn charges across that meadow at the end of the film, reins clenched in his teeth, firing with both hands, the weight and presence of that Walker revolver makes the moment feel dangerous rather than theatrical. You can see the gun jumping in his grip with every shot. Number 6. The Gatling Gun. Richard Gatling invented this hand-cranked weapon in 1861, and it changed warfare forever. The gun could fire up to 600 rounds per minute in .45 to .70 caliber, mowing down infantry formations that had relied on single-shot rifles for generations. Cavalry officers mounted Gatling guns on wagons and used them to break up enemy charges before soldiers could close to bayonet range. Wayne used the Gatling gun in Rooster Cogburn, the 1975 sequel that paired him with Katharine Hepburn for the first and only time. The film climaxes with Wayne's character manning the Gatling on a raft, spraying bullets at outlaws along the riverbank while the water churns around him. The scene pushed credibility. A Gatling gun on a wooden raft would have been nearly impossible to control given the recoil and weight of the weapon. But that was exactly the point. By 1975, Wayne was in his late 60s and fighting cancer that would eventually take his life. He needed a weapon that could compensate for what his body could no longer do. The Gatling allowed him to dominate a gunfight while barely moving, turning physical limitation into cinematic spectacle. Audiences did not see a sick old man struggling against time. They saw a legend with enough firepower to level an army. Number 5. The Winchester Model 1866, which everyone called the Yellow Boy because of its distinctive brass receiver. This lever-action rifle held 17 rounds of 44 rimfire ammunition and represented a massive leap forward from the single-shot muskets of the Civil War era. Wayne carried the Yellow Boy in Fort Apache, the 1948 John Ford cavalry picture, where he played Captain Kirby York. The brass frame caught light beautifully on camera, making Wayne stand out in group shots even when he was not the focus of a scene. More importantly, the rifle grounded his character in a specific historical moment. Fort Apache takes place in the years after the Civil War, when the Army was fighting across the Southwest. The Yellow Boy was exactly what a frontier officer would have carried. This kind of period accuracy became a Wayne trademark. He understood that audiences might not consciously notice whether a gun belonged in 1878 or 1898, but they would feel the difference. Authentic props created authentic characters. Number 4. The M1911-01 pistol. John Browning designed this .45 caliber semi-automatic handgun in 1911, and the military used it as a standard sidearm through both World Wars, Korea, and Vietnam. Wayne carried the M1911A1 in films like The Fighting Seabees from 1944 and Cast a Giant Shadow from 1966. These were war pictures rather than westerns, and they required a different kind of hero. The Seabees were Navy construction battalions who built airstrips and bases while Japanese forces tried to kill them. Cast a Giant Shadow told the story of an American officer helping Israel during its 1948 War of Independence. In both films, Wayne needed to look like a modern soldier rather than a frontier gunfighter. The M1911 A1 accomplished that instantly. Its angular profile and semi-automatic action signaled 20th century warfare. But the gun also connected to Wayne's established screen persona. The M1911A1 was famously reliable, famous for working in mud and sand and salt water when other pistols jammed. That dependability matched characters who kept fighting when others gave up. Number 3. The M1 Garand rifle. This semi-automatic rifle, chambered in .30-06 Springfield, became the standard American infantry weapon during World War II. General George Patton called it the greatest battle implement ever devised, and every soldier who carried one remembered the distinctive ping sound it made when the 8-round clip ejected after the last shot. That sound became part of the war experience for an entire generation. Wayne used the M1 Garand in Sands of Iwo Jima, the 1949 film that earned him his first Academy Award nomination. He played Sergeant Stryker, a Marine Corps drill instructor who turns raw recruits into combat soldiers and then leads them up the volcanic slopes of Iwo Jima. The Garand was central to the film's appeal and its emotional impact. Sands of Iwo Jima used actual combat footage blended with studio recreations, and the authenticity of the weapons made those transitions seamless. When Wayne cycled the Garand's action or loaded a fresh clip, he was performing the exact movements that millions of American veterans recognized from their own service in the Pacific. The gun built trust with audiences who had lived through the war and remained suspicious of Hollywood glamorization. They could tell when an actor knew how to handle a rifle and when he was faking it. Number 2. The Winchester Model 1892 rifle. John Browning designed this lever-action rifle for Winchester, chambering it in .44-40 and building it strong enough to handle the new smokeless powder cartridges that were replacing black powder across the American frontier. Wayne carried the 1892 in more than a dozen films, most famously in Stagecoach, the 1939 John Ford Western that transformed him from a B-movie actor into a genuine star. But the rifle that audiences remember had a modification that changed Western films forever. Stuntman Yakima Canute enlarged the lever loop so Wayne could spin the rifle with one hand, cocking it dramatically without shifting his grip or breaking eye contact with whoever he was about to shoot. That oversized loop became iconic. Wayne used it in Rio Bravo, El Dorado, and Big Jake, spinning the rifle to cock it between shots in a way that no real gunfighter would have attempted, because it would have gotten them killed. The move was pure Hollywood invention. It sacrificed accuracy for style, but it worked because Wayne made it look effortless, like this was simply how a man of the West handled a rifle. The enlarged loop is now called the John Wayne loop, and replica manufacturers still produce it for collectors who want to own a piece of cinema history. Number 1. The Colt Single Action Army Revolver. This is the gun. The Peacemaker. The six-shooter that won the West in American mythology, even if the historical reality was considerably more complicated. Colt introduced the single-action army in 1873, chambering it in .45 long Colt, and designing it for the cavalry soldiers fighting across the Great Plains against Native American nations who refused to surrender their land. The gun was simple, reliable, and accurate enough for combat at horseback ranges where speed mattered more than precision. Wayne carried the single-action army in over 25 films across 5 decades of American cinema. He used it in his early B-westerns during the 1930s, when the grips were bright nickel plate designed to sparkle for young audiences eating popcorn at Saturday matinees. He used it in Red River and The Searchers and Rio Bravo as his career matured, and the finishes became weathered and realistic, matching characters who had lived hard lives on the frontier. He used it in True Grit, where he dual-wielded a pair of them during that famous charge scene that won him his Oscar. And he used it in The Shootist, his final film, where he carried a specially engraved replica made by Great Western Arms as a tribute to the weapon that had defined his career. The single-action army defined Wayne more than any other weapon because it represented everything his character stood for. The gun required skill. You had to cock the hammer manually before each shot. You had to reload one cartridge at a time through a loading gate. There were no shortcuts. The Peacemaker rewarded patience and practice, exactly the qualities that Wayne's best characters demonstrated. In The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, prop masters filed down the hammer spur so Wayne could fan the gun faster during quick draw scenes. In True Grit, the ivory-colored grips were actually Catalan plastic, chosen because real ivory would have cracked under location filming conditions. These small details mattered. They showed that Wayne and his collaborators understood weapons as storytelling tools rather than simple props. And that understanding is what separated Wayne from every other Western star of his era. His guns were never just guns. They were character traits made visible. The Winchester 1892, with its spinning loop, told audiences that this hero was flashy and confident, maybe a little reckless. The Colt Walker told audiences that this hero meant business, that he was not interested in intimidation when violence would solve the problem faster. The M1 Garand told audiences that this hero was a professional soldier, trained and disciplined, part of something larger than himself. Each firearm carried meaning beyond its mechanical function. Hollywood Westerns have always played loose with historical accuracy, and Wayne's films were no exception. He fired Winchester 1892 rifles in films set during the 1870s, years before the gun existed in any factory or gunsmith shop. He used cartridge ammunition in Colt Walkers that were originally designed for cap and ball ignition. Directors and audiences rarely noticed or cared about these discrepancies. What mattered was emotional truth rather than documentary precision. A gun that looked right and sounded right and fit the character was more valuable than a gun that matched museum records. But Wayne pushed for authenticity more than most. He worked with armorers who understood the difference between a Colt, made in 1873, and a Colt, made in 1893. He rejected props that felt wrong even when he could not articulate exactly why. This instinct helped elevate the Western genre from disposable entertainment into genuine American mythology. When Wayne held a gun, audiences believed in the frontier. They believed in lawmen who tamed wild towns and soldiers who won impossible wars and outlaws who lived by their own codes. The guns made those beliefs tangible. Modern Westerns still draw from the vocabulary that Wayne established. When contemporary filmmakers want to signal that a character is dangerous, they reach for a big bore revolver. When they want to signal competence, they show smooth weapon handling. When they want to signal the mythic American past, they show lever-action rifles and single-action revolvers exactly like the ones Wayne carried for 50 years. Collectors still seek out the actual guns Wayne used on screen. A Winchester 1892 from Stembridge Rentals with documented John Wayne provenance can fetch $50,000 or more at auction. Replica manufacturers produce the Rooster shooter, a single-action Army clone based on the guns from True Grit. The John Wayne loop remains a standard option on lever-action rifles. His influence extends from film history into the actual firearms market, shaping what guns people want to own and why. 7 guns, 170 films, 50 years of American cinema. John Wayne built his legend one trigger pull at a time, and those weapons remain as iconic as the man who carried them. If you want more stories about the guns that shaped Hollywood history, subscribe to ReelCaliber and hit that notification bell. We cover the firearms behind the films that changed everything.